Rejoice that you're alive today and that the jihadis haven't had their way. We hope and pray they never will. And free people are alive and working still. It ain't Shakespeare, ladies and gentlemen. It ain't even Apostate Prophet's cool ambient Middle Eastern music or Hatoon's wonderful "All there is a full scout, a full scout, a full scout, all there is." I don't have that stuff. So if you have any ideas, I guess I could just say TikTok time to rock. But anyway, TikTok time to rock. Here we are with the great, the one, the only David Wood for another thrilling episode of This Week in Jihad. David, welcome. And let me ask you a question, David, to start with. You often say that you have not heard any of the jihad stories that we talk about during the hour. Have you heard of any jihad news, jihad-related news this past week?
I'm trying to think as far as news agencies. No, I must have missed it all. I did see a clip or two on Twitter of like Muslims in the UK like kicking cop cars and stuff like this, and then people complaining that multiculturalism isn't working. The main news, as far as I can tell, because these are the issues I focus on. The main news from the past week is that everything we've been saying that Islam teaches for the past 2 decades, everything we've said that Islam teaches, and we were called liars and bigots and racists and Islamophobes simply for saying, guys, this is what Islam teaches. Look, it's right here. We're quoting it for you. We're quoting it for you. And yes, it's possible to take things out of context and so on. So let's go ahead and read it in context. And let us give you 27 different commentaries from the greatest Muslim commentators of all time to show you it means exactly what we're saying. 14 centuries of Muslims said it means exactly what we're saying. All of a sudden we get to this time right now, 21st century, and Muslims are saying, no, anyone who says that's what Islam teaches is a complete liar. Well, every single thing that we were called liars for saying for the past 2 decades, Muslims are now shouting from the rooftops and saying, you see, we defend our scriptures. We believe in our scriptures. That's why we defend. It's like, wait a minute, you guys have lied. You guys have done nothing but lie about this for 2 decades. Suddenly society transforms a little bit where instead of tolerance being this virtue, people are getting sick of it and they're wanting more intolerance. And you say, we're the intolerant ones. Aha, yeah, that's right. We kill the apostates. And yes, we marry children. And yes, we believe in slavery. And yes, we beat our wives into submission. Ha ha, we're so based, right? And so it's just, I don't know, man. It's like massive. I mean, the level of vindication for us to be saying one thing for 20 straight years and to be called liars every step of the way by Muslim spokespeople, by Muslim organizations, by non-Muslim politicians and journalists and educators and entertainers. Every single thing we say, liar, 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 liar. And now all of a sudden, yeah, they were right the entire time. We were lying the entire time. They were telling the truth the entire time. But now we're going to tell the truth. I mean, it's I don't know, man. It's just amazing. And when you connect it to like all the arguments that have now collapsed, that were all lies, and they admit it. They now acknowledge that this was all lies, right? The scientific miracles of the Quran, they now acknowledge this was all lies. The perfect preservation of the Quran, they now acknowledge that it was all lies. And then everything we said about Islam, child marriage, killing apostates, jihad, all this stuff we were called liars for, now they're shouting it from the rooftops. And keep in mind, because back in the day, the response of the journalists would be, oh, that's just, one random guy in Afghanistan who believes that. Muslims don't believe that. Now, as soon as their da'is step up and say, that's right, we kill apostates. That's right, we marry kids. Muslims of the world start rallying around them. And it's like you didn't all suddenly change your minds. It's just, now we're being honest about some of the things Islam teaches. Now the cat's out of the bag. Okay, yeah, we do believe everything Robert was saying for the past 2 decades. It's awesome.
It's a glorious time to be alive, David.
These are awesome times.
Yes, indeed. Anyway, a lot of jihad as well. Besides that, and so let's get right to it. We have quite a bit of violence. We have the usual array of stupid infidels. Where do you want to go, David? What do you think? You want to pick a continent for us?
I'm pretty comfortable with whatever you come up with, Robert.
Okay, well
Wait,
then,
I noticed my mic's turned down. I don't know if it's supposed to. Let me turn this
your
up.
mic is turned down. Let me turn you up.
What's the no on my end? I don't
Okay.
know why, but it turned down. How's it look? How's it look? Does it look even with yours? I turned
Yes,
mine
it
up a little.
does. It
Okay,
does
we're
look,
good.
yeah.
Then we're
As
good.
far as I can tell, they are quite equivalent, but perhaps the ladies and gentlemen of the jury can let us know. Anyway, okay, we'll start in New Mexico. You remember this story from a few years back. Siraj ibn Wahhaj, the son of Siraj Wahhaj, who for years, he's old now, but he has been one of the leading Muslim spokesmen in the United States for many years. Pretty much every Islamic conference, or almost every Islamic conference, all for years, all the major Muslim organizations, they would feature him as a speaker, Siraj Wahhaj. And his son, Siraj ibn Wahhaj, went off to New Mexico to get an army together to train people to train children to kill people for Allah.
Hey,
This,
I forgot about that.
yeah, its story was actually a couple years old, but it's in the news this week because only now, as the slow wheels of justice turn, only now is the trial beginning. And so it's useful to recall that Siraj Wahhaj, being one of the most prominent Muslim spokesmen in the United States, is an example of exactly the kind of thing you're talking about with the Dawagandists and the Islamic apologists. Because I am sure that if we went back to his assembled speeches and writings, you would find him excoriating us as Islamophobes and saying that Islam is peace and wonderfulness and tolerance. And his own son, who bears his name, is going to New Mexico to raise up a jihad army of children to shoot up schools. Where did he get this idea? Did the apple not fall far from the tree? Or is Siraj ibn Wahhaj somebody who has drastically misunderstood his own father's understanding of Islam? Or maybe he's rebelling against it.
There's only one real explanation here, Robert. Because we know Islam doesn't teach these things, so he must have listened to you and concluded that you're right, and then started all this mess. And oh wait, that's the explanation from like 5 years ago. That they're just getting this from somewhere else. They can't be getting this from Islam. Wait a second, Muslims now admit that Islam does teach all these things. Oh yeah, okay, maybe he got it from Islam.
Maybe he did. That would be really wild. Imagine that he could have gotten the idea to wage jihad from Islam. This is a new thing that American authorities have never considered.
Yeah, but now, I mean, again, it's weird because back in the day, they could say, because every Muslim spokesman they were talking to, no, that has nothing to do with Islam. No, religion of peace over here, nothing but peace over here. And so you're looking and, well, how do we explain these guys over there? How do we explain what's going on in Pakistan? And then the explanation was, oh yeah, it's just because the West, man. The West has bullied them and now made them want to do jihad. And so it's a perfectly natural reaction, man. But they're not getting it from Islam. They're not getting that from Islam. This is just a reaction because they're really, really mad. And then, of course, you get ISIS, and they start slaughtering their fellow Muslims and so on that they regard as heretics. But notice with ISIS, all of a sudden, Muslims started coming from the UK and France and the US and Canada and swarming to the Middle East to join ISIS. Not swarming down there to oppose ISIS and say these guys are misrepresenting Islam. We have to stand and fight against them. No, they started swarming down there to join ISIS, and then people start realizing, wait a minute, why do we have Western converts going down there and joining this? I thought it was just because these there are people in certain countries who've been abused all their lives, and so they absorb some bad ideas. These guys are over here. They've been in America all their lives, and they conclude somehow that they're supposed to go and slaughter unbelievers in the name of Allah. And then you get down to our time, and now, you've got, modern Muslim American converts to Islam. Of course, once we get an Islamic State, we're going to chop your head off. Of course we are. Of course we. How do you deny it at this point? So, yep. It's not going to work, Robert. Not going to work. The Dawa lies are collapsing, and they're they're coming up with new lies to replace the old lies.
The whole story is breaking down indeed. But meanwhile, the infidels are as stupid as ever, if not stupider. I don't know if you've seen this, David. Let me get it here. Have you seen this thing?
Is that statue that's supposed to represent women in?
Yeah, this is the strength of hijab. That's the name of it. And it
Powerful.
is a statue that is going up in Birmingham, England, to celebrate women who wear hijab. It's a very large sculpture. You can't tell from here, but it's a massive thing, many feet high, and it is designed to glorify those who wear the hijab. Meanwhile, there have been many women who have been brutalized and killed all over the world for not wearing the hijab. Britain does not presently have any plans to build a statue in their honor.
But they've got a point with this strength of jihad, or strength of hijab. Power of the hijab and so on. According to the Quran, it can help you not be molested, right? That's what it says. Keep you from wear this or you'll be molested. And of course, lots of fans of Muhammad interpret that to mean that if a woman doesn't wear the hijab, then she's basically begging to be molested.
That's chapter 33, verse 59, by the way, folks, so that we've had requests that we always specify, so you can look it up in your copy of the Critical Quran, chapter 33, verse 59. All right, David, I think the biggest jihad story, actually, this week is the terrible story out of Artsakh, or Nagorno-Karabakh, which is an Armenian Christian area of Azerbaijan, where 120,000 Christians have now fled the area after 9 months of being blockaded and starved out by the Azerbaijani government. And the fear is that there's going to be a new genocide of the Armenians there. What people don't realize, of course, what's never been reported about this, is that this is jihad. This is the kind, people are talking about ethnic cleansing, and this is exactly the kind of ethnic cleansing that created the Islamic world today. That we have Egypt and North Africa and so on the way they are with 99% Muslims because the Christians were terrorized, the other non-Muslims as well, starved out, attacked, subjected under the rules of dimitude and so on, until finally there was only a handful left. And this is the same thing going on now in real time in Azerbaijan.
Now, wait a second, Robert. I'm a little confused here because you said new Armenian genocide. That would suggest that there was a former Armenian genocide. What in the name of common sense are you talking about there?
Yeah, that was the genocide.
I don't hear anything about this. In fact, every time it comes up, there are a bunch of people say, stop lying.
That's right. 2 million Armenians, 1 million Greeks, 300,000 Assyrians murdered by the Turks. And people say this was the Young Turks, the Kemalists. They were secularists. This has nothing to do with Islam. That is not true. In the first place, they were coming out of an Islamic cultural context in which the imams had been for years preaching that Armenia and Greece, the Armenians, Greeks, and Assyrians, rather, were kufar harbi, infidels at war with Islam, because they were wanting independence. The Greeks had declared independence in 1821, but there were still quite a lot of Greeks outside of the independent Greece, and they wanted enosis, unity with the Greeks in Greece. The Armenians wanted their state, the Assyrians wanted their state, and the Ottomans began the genocide actually in the mid-1890s because they thought that these were infidels who were rejecting their subjugated state, and thus they deserved to be killed. And the Young Turks just carried that on and made it an element of their nationalistic program that a secularized Islam would be part of the Turkish identity, so the Christians had no place in secular Turkey either. But the whole genocide was rooted in Islamic principles.
But well, now it's starting to come back to me, Robert. I seem to recall. I seem to recall that this entire process of loading people onto trains and sending them to their executions and so on convinced a young upcoming German leader that it was actually possible to wipe out entire populations. It was thought you couldn't do this sort of thing, not in the modern world. You can never get away with it. The world would expose it. And then he saw it and saw it happen and saw you could actually get away with it, and actually convinced him, yes, you can completely cleanse a population of some other group, and the world is going to sit back and do nothing.
That's right.
And he went out and did it. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, he said, even today, who remembers the Armenians?
Mm-hmm.
And he was absolutely confident that because the world had forgotten the Armenian genocide, that it would forget the genocide of the Jews that he himself was carrying out. So, here we are on the threshold of yet another genocide of the Armenians, because the Western world nowadays seems never to learn, or absolutely unwilling to learn, the truth about Islam and jihad.
Yeah, and it's this is one of the I think this is going to be like the biggest at least one of the biggest issues to deal with over the next decade or two, in that you just have a lot of stupid people looking at the world thinking, it's, relatively peaceful compared to, a lot of things that have gone on in the past, and we've just evolved to this point where, we get along much better, and not realizing that a lot of people in the world have been waiting until they smell weakness,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like let me give you an example. Like Saddam. We look at Saddam. Hey, evil tyrant, evil dictator. And we in the West think, hey, get rid of the evil dictator, not realizing he's actually someone who was keeping jihadis in check, because they're all scared of him, because he'd just massacre them if they got out of line. So they're all terrified of Saddam, even though he's like horrible, evil person. He's actually keeping people. They're scared of him. They're there, and as soon as Saddam is out of the way, then all these guys start blowing up each other's mosques and start killing Christians and start raping Yazidis and so on. They start doing all this stuff. And you're like, well, what's going on here? Where did all these people come from? Those people were there. They were scared of someone else, and so they had dialed it back and were waiting until they smelled weakness, which after Saddam's gone, then it's okay. These people, Saddam was brutal, which made us scared. The other people, they're not brutal. So now we can go resume. We can do what we've wanted to do all along. And people don't realize that a lot of groups in a lot of different countries are waiting to do things like this, right? They're waiting to go. They're waiting for genocide. They're waiting for the opportunity. They were scared for a while because Western nations would come in there and do something about it. Now that the West is looking weaker and weaker and weaker, they can start up programs that they didn't get to finish in the past.
It's an ongoing thing, David. The jihadis are very patient. In one of my other books, The History of Jihad, I show this 1400 years. They have some setbacks, but they just keep coming. And the non-Muslims have never really understood that on a large scale. And so they're never prepared for it, and the jihadis keep advancing.
Oh yeah, and so I think the world is about to get really, really interesting, because it's not just the jihadis. You have the entire jihadi world. They want to go on killing sprees. They've been scared of Western nations for a while. You had Russia, China, North Korea. There are all these groups and countries, some small, some big, that are basically waiting to flex, and they realize they were a little outgunned for several decades. We're outgunned, so we gotta lay back and wait. And well, their patience is soon going to pay off for their desires to slaughter tons and tons of people.
Indeed. And then everything that we have said is going to be obvious. But I just hope it's not too late by then. All right, a little Sunni Shiite jihad we got, David, in Iran.
Impossible.
It's the Shiite authorities in Iran said 30 explosive sites, 30 bombs were defused, and 28 Islamic State members, Islamic State jihadis, were arrested. The Islamic State, ISIS, of course, is Sunni, and the Islamic Republic of Iran is Shiite, and so they are mortal enemies.
Wait, I thought ISIS lost.
Yeah, ISIS was eradicated. Yes, the ISIS unfortunately is very patient, just like we've been talking about, and they're making immense gains all over Africa, in West Africa in particular, around Nigeria. And I got a story actually, David. Let me find it here somewhere. There it is. Story out of Ghana. I don't think we've had a story out of Ghana in all the time we've been doing this show. There was a jihad incident in Ghana near the Burkina Faso border. 9 people were killed when the jihadis fired on a couple of vehicles carrying traders to the market. But the thing about it is, Ghana is not a place where we have seen jihad activity before. But they are aggressive, they're expanding, they're on the march. They see the weakness of the West. They see the weakness of the governments in West Africa and Central Africa. And so they're advancing as much as they can.
And it's like ISIS was just the beginning of what's going to happen, because ISIS put up way more of a fight than everyone thought they were going to put up, right? Because I mean, like, you remember when they started, and what did Obama say? Compared it to a JV team, like a
Oh,
high
yeah.
school, yeah, like
Yeah.
a JV basketball team. And then Ben Affleck, that that brilliant scholar, he said these ISIS, they couldn't fill a minor league ballpark or something like that. And it took years. It took years from like the entire, like all the nations of the world to stop these guys. And then you still didn't really stop them. They went and became more like a more successful version of Al Qaeda.
Hmm.
But think about this: it took years for some really powerful nations to stop these guys. I mean, the United States, still super powerful. United States fights in Afghanistan for 2 decades, walks out, and it was like nothing had happened. Like we had no impact there after we left. And all of a sudden now, Western nations are crumbling. And what's gonna stand up to this against these guys next time? In other words, guys, you're getting a new caliphate here pretty soon. In the next several years, you're going to get some new caliphate, and maybe even ISIS jumps back into that caliphate role or something like that.
Hmm.
But you're not. There are going to be so many things wrong with the rest of the world that the rest of the world isn't going to care. And who's going to be the victims? Same people: the Yazidis, the Christians, minority Muslim groups who are in the wrong area. Yeah. Anyway, there are consequences, ladies and gentlemen, consequences for our decisions.
Absolutely, David. And I think that I'll make a prediction right now that that caliphate's going to be in Africa, because in Africa, the West is already bailing.
Yeah.
The French actually, Al Qaeda, people don't know this, but it was back in 2017, if I recall correctly, Al Qaeda imitated ISIS and gained control over a large expanse of territory in Mali and declared their own caliphate there. And the French came in and crushed it. And the French have been holding things together in that region ever since. But now the French have realized it's just an endless war
Mhm.
against these patient people who are fighting a 1400-year conflict. And so they're bailing. And the governments in the area are either on the side of the jihadis, as in Nigeria, or powerless to stop them. And this is not actually just in West Africa, but also in other areas such as Somalia and East Africa, where 21 people were killed with a truck bomb by Al-Shabaab, the jihad group in Somalia, just the other day. And every time this happens anywhere in Africa, the government says, we're going to go in and crush these guys. Nothing ever happens. They're either unable or unwilling to do it. And so I believe we're going to see a caliphate in Africa before too long.
Would not surprise me. Matter of fact, it would be more surprising if we don't see that.
Indeed, indeed. In Kenya, for example, the same Al-Shabaab group comes out from Somalia, goes into Kenya, and does jihad raids after the pattern of Muhammad himself. Murdered one person, torched a bunch of houses, That was this past week, and the state imposed a curfew. That's going to fix everything. Oh, a curfew. So the jihadis,
Oh,
they'll have to go inside and watch TV.
yeah.
Uh, yes.
Yeah, if the curfew doesn't work, just institute a good spanking. That'll
Hmm.
stop them. We're good.
They'll have to
Anyone,
sit in the corner.
yeah, anyone who wages jihad's gonna get a timeout.
A timeout. In Uganda, of course, we know that there's an especial hatred among the Muslim population there for Christians who preach to Muslims, because, of course, preaching to Muslims is forbidden in Islamic law. And so there's a regular stream of stories like this. There was a Christian evangelist named Philip Beret, and he was riding his bicycle after an event where he had led several Muslims to Christ, and he was confronted by several other Muslims. They stopped him, knocked him off his bicycle, hit him over the head with a large rock, and killed him. This is, of course, in line with the Islamic laws regarding proselytization. And Uganda is majority Christian, but the Muslims seem to believe they have absolute impunity to act in this way.
And it's interesting because like things when it comes to things like apostasy laws and so on, and our Muslim friends, for years they say no, there's no such thing in Islam. In Islam, it's actually the real rule is if someone leaves his Islamic religion, then goes out and joins a foreign military and then invades us, then we can fight them. It's like, stop. What's the point of what's the role of the apostasy then? We already knew you could fight someone who's invading you and attacking you. What's the point of what's the role of the apostasy? And second problem, if you're saying that's what Muhammad really meant, then he is the worst communicator in history. Because if I want to say, hey, fight someone who goes out and joins a conquering military and is coming to kill us, and you can defend yourself, and I say anyone who leaves his Islamic religion, kill him. That's a really, really bad way of saying that, and so that's like insanely stupid. But even all the Dawa guys who now admit it, of course we kill apostates in Islam. Of course we kill apostates in Islam. Even now that they're admitting it and they're not telling the same lie from back in the day, they generally say it's in an Islamic state. It's once you have an Islamic government, you have an emir, and then there'll be the investigation. They'll lock you up. Some schools of jurisprudence believe that there has to be some sort of waiting period to give a person a time to convert back to Islam and so on. So they'll say these things. But I mean, think about this. If you're a Muslim, you read the Quran, you read the Hadith, you see if anyone leaves his Islamic religion, kill him. It doesn't say kill him in an Islamic state after an investigation. It doesn't say that, right? You have schools of Islamic jurisprudence who conclude that is, that's what you're supposed to do. But that's why it's so common for people to kind of take the law into their own hands and wage terrorist attacks and kill apostates or do something else in a completely different country where you don't have an Islamic state. And so a lot of these commands is like, oh, this guy tells me I need to wait for an Islamic state, but I don't see what Muhammad just says, do it.
Indeed. While we're in Africa, I wanted to note a story out of Mozambique. In Mozambique, in Cabo Delgado, where an ISIS-related group has a very significant presence. The 11 people were killed last week when Islamic jihadis went into a village and asked people if they were Christian or Muslim, separated the Christians from the Muslims, sent the Muslims away, and killed 11 of the Christians. Now, this is something we've seen many times. At jihadwatch.org, I have a long list. Did you know that in 2016, David, there was a Muslim in St. Cloud, Minnesota, who went into the mall and asked people what their religion was, and if they didn't say they were Muslims, there are a lot of Muslims in that area, but the non-Muslims he stabbed. And this has happened also in Mozambique before, in Uganda, in Nigeria, in Burkina Faso, in the Philippines, in Mali, in Kenya, in a very famous incident at a mall in 2013. And so,
Yeah,
why on earth would they
I just,
kill the Christians and not the Muslims?
yeah, I met someone who said he's friends with someone. This guy was the guy I met was a missionary in Kenya, and I said, "Oh yeah, you guys had that Nairobi Mall massacre." And he said, "Yeah, he knew a Christian who was actually working in a place in who's working in the mall, and so unfortunately he didn't get killed." But yeah, you have um, some different perspectives here because there are only certain circumstances in which you're supposed to deliberately kill someone who has become a Muslim. So if someone commits adultery or if someone has killed another Muslim, you can have a death penalty here. Or if someone apostatizes, leaves Islam, then you can kill him. So generally, you're supposed to avoid deliberately killing your fellow Muslims. The questions did arise. Well, what if we're using catapults to attack a city or something, and they have the concept of collateral damage. Hey, you're targeting the unbelievers. That's your goal, subjugating the unbelievers. If some believers get killed along the way, no harm, no foul. Wasn't your intent. But yeah, so if you are doing, I mean, if you're going on a killing spree and you just want to kill a bunch of people, I mean, who are you going to be focused on? You're going to be focused on the non-Muslims, and you
Hmm.
don't want to kill Muslims as part of your terrorist attack if you can help it.
That would be a crime against the Quran, chapter 4, verse 92. You don't kill a fellow Muslim.
Oh,
All
and
right.
I
Yes,
have
sir.
to I have to point out that there is there is an important caveat there, which is used by Al Qaeda, because I mean they're blowing up entire buildings and killing Muslims in these attacks. But there are two. One is the concept of collateral damage. You're actually targeting the unbelievers and their entire system, and therefore, if you kill some Muslims in addition to that, then you weren't targeting them. But the additional issue is some Muslims view Muslims who actually pay taxes as part of the entire system. You're actually apostates or heretics without realizing it, because you have these rules about making mischief in Muslim lands. And this is laid out by Al Qaeda, but it's straight from the Muslim sources. You have your concept of straight from the Quran, Surah 5, verse 33. If you make mischief in the land, the penalty is death or dismemberment or crucifixion or something like that. So they say, okay, Western militaries, Western governments have made mischief in Muslim lands, therefore there are death penalties. But there's also this concept in Islam that the person who pays the bills for other people to fight is equally responsible. So if you're a jihadi, you get your reward for being a jihadi, but the person who paid for you to be a jihadi, if someone paid for your weapons and so on, that person gets the same reward that you get in paradise. But the flip side is true as well. If you're an unbeliever and you're making mischief in a Muslim land, you're not the only one responsible. Who actually paid for you to be able to go and do this? And so they reasoned, wait a minute, if America is making mischief in Muslim lands, and the people who pay for the military to be able to do that are under a death sentence as well, who's that? Well, that's the average American taxpayer. Guess what? If you're working in the mall or you're working in the World Trade Center and you're a Muslim, you're funding that entire system as well of
Mhm.
making mischief in Muslim lands. And so some of them believe you're actually under a death sentence too for your crimes against Islam, even if you are a Muslim. So some don't have a problem with it at all. But yeah, I mean, you can understand why some jihadis would take steps to avoid that, even though there is justification for it.
Oh, yes. Okay. We are, time's running out here, so let's go on to some stupid infidels. There's plenty more violent jihad, but we'll get back to it and some other things as well, if time permits. But I wanted to go to our favorite country, David, of Germany, and the German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier. And Frank-Walter Steinmeier he's very happy this week. He was speaking at the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Association of Islamic Cultural Centers in Cologne or Köln, and he said, the diversity of Islam today, the diversity of over 5 million Muslims, is part of our country. Islam, the Muslim religion, Muslim life, Muslim culture have taken root in our country. Cause for celebration, am I right?
Well, if you're Hitler, because that was his dream, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, for everyone who doesn't know, Hitler, he's a Christian. Hitler hated Christianity. He thought he thought Christianity was what was keeping the German people from conquering everything they wanted to conquer. So he believed that biologically, genetically, the Germans were superior. They're superior to other groups. They're supposedly smarter and just better all around. Well, why shouldn't they dominate the world? Well, he believed that Christianity keeps you, meek and stuff, and that's not what you want. And so he lamented, why couldn't we have the religion of the Japanese or of the Muslims, where it's like fighting is built into the system? If we only had that, we'd just conquer the world. And now modern Germans are making Hitler's dream come true.
It's incredible. It's breathtaking.
Robert, you need to make like a short book on that. Hitler's dreams come true, or something like that.
Thanks to Angela Merkel.
Yep.
And Frank-Walter Steinmeier, Olaf Scholz. All right. Meanwhile, over in England, Justin Welby, really, he's the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he recently hosted 2 Muslim leaders to Lambeth Palace for tea and cake, including a Muslim cleric who is tied to Iran, Muhammad Ali Shamali. Also, Muhammad Kozbar, the leader of the Muslim Council of Britain, who has praised the founder of Hamas as a holy warrior or jihadi. Do you think Justin Welby may be a little bit unwise to do this, David?
No, how could he be wrong? He's a scholar. He's a scholar and a gentleman. Robert, come on.
And he's the Archbishop of Canterbury. In any case, he did it. It's done. He had tea and cake with these guys. It's just incredible to me that, if somebody had said, "Hey, Justin Welby, why don't you have tea and cake with David Wood and Robert Spencer?" And he would be horrified. He would be positively gobsmacked. But
if someone says, yes, we want to kill apostates and take your wives and daughters as sex slaves, and we want to marry little kids and so on, we want to do all this stuff.
Do come in.
Tolerance.
Please have some tea.
Yes. You want some lemon in it?
Exactly. Meanwhile, the victimhood industry just keeps rolling along. Right here in the United States, there is the case of Hassan Minhaj. Now, I can't say that I've heard of this guy. Have you heard of this guy, David? Hassan Minhaj?
The name rings a bell, but I don't know if I'm thinking of someone else with a similar name.
He is a comedian. He is a Muslim comedian, and he had a stand-up comedy show on Netflix.
Comedy
in
is
2022. Yeah, The King's Jester. But as you might expect in this line, it was not funny. These guys, they just, nowadays, really hardly anybody's funny anymore, and the comedians are just political hacks. And this Hassan Minhaj is just a victimhood. Oh, poor me, I suffer from Islamophobia guy, and that's his whole act. And so he tells this long story in his Netflix show about how there was an FBI informant in his mosque in 2002.
I wonder why.
Well, the thing is, he was lying. There was no FBI informant there because he named the guy, and the guy was in jail in 2002 and became an FBI informant in mosques later on in 2006. But he claims that he found him out, that he was an FBI informant, and started feeding him misinformation because he was so angry that this clown was infiltrating his mosque. And so police came and roughed him up. That is Hassan Minhaj.
Mhm.
But none of this ever happened. And the guy that was a real FBI informant in mosques, probably very inept and very stupid, because the FBI has no idea what jihad and Islam are all about. So probably he stuck out. So I actually don't doubt that if he had been there, that Hassan Minhaj would have been able to spot him. That part I have no trouble believing. But he wasn't. He was in prison, so he wasn't there. Uh,
Yeah. So I think his real name is Hassan Smollett. Uh,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
or Sheikh Uthman. Sheikh Uthman also faked a hate crime with the fake blood on him. Like it's like
Oh yeah.
it was like the same fake blood that you go into a Halloween store right now before Halloween and get this fake blood. It's the exact same fake blood. Like we joke and say it was ketchup. No, it was actually store fake blood. But you can tell it's obviously fake blood. But notice, so you got that on the one hand. On the other hand, they've got this issue with informants being in mosques and so on. Guess what? If there's nothing to inform on, it's not going to go very far.
Mhm.
But I remember in New York, I've pointed this out before when we talk about, how much the government is on the ball, because we think of the government as really, really stupid. But I mean, I lived in New York and I counted after the attempted terrorist attacks in New York City after 9/11, there were like 12 in a row that I
Mhm.
counted over the years. There were like 12 in a row, and every single time the government stopped them ahead of time. Police stopped them, FBI stopped them, Homeland Security stopped them. And it seemed to be pretty frequently because of informants in the mosque. Like, hey,
Mhm.
there's this guy going around. Hey, you know where I could get bomb building instructions? Hey, you know where I can get an AK-47? Blah blah blah. And they're just like, that's why the scary ones are the guys who just do everything on their own and mind their own business and plot and plan completely on their own. Those are the guys that are really, really hard to catch. But a lot of these guys just, hey, I've decided I want to die in jihad and go get my virgins and stuff. So I want to do this quickly. Hey, anyone know where I can get a big bomb to go blow up the subway? And then they get turned in and so on. Your good
Mhm.
buddy Hassan Minhaj Smollett, probably not a fan of the people who informed on these guys.
Oh yeah. And that wasn't even it. There was more. Hassan Minhaj also did a routine about. He said that he did a show about the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, the Al Qaeda linked journalist who was killed by the Saudi government, and about Hindu nationalism and Narendra Modi, and that after that he got a envelope in the mail full of anthrax, and his little baby daughter or little toddler daughter, whatever, got the anthrax on her and had to be rushed to the hospital. None of this happened. There was no hospitalization. There was no anthrax. He probably got no threats at all. Uh, Meanwhile, he said that when he was in school, he asked out a woman he referred to as a white girl, and she turned him down because she was racist and Islamophobic. And she has come forward and said, none of that happened. That's not why I did turn him down, but she probably turned him down because he was a lying dweeb and not
Uh,
because he was a Muslim.
I mean, he sounds like the Muslim Rodney Dangerfield. I don't get no respect.
Tough crowd, tough crowd. All right, moving right along, we have Volker Turk. Volker Turk, I don't think he's a Turk, David. He's a United Nations wonk. He is the human rights chief for the United Nations. And so we can all be pleased and proud tonight that Volker Turk is being vigilant to protect our human rights. And he has now appealed to the Taliban. He says that there's a human rights catastrophe shaping up in Afghanistan, and the human rights are in a state of collapse in Afghanistan. And he has warned the Taliban that they should change course, or they will face possible sanctions from the UN. Do you think this is going to move the Taliban? You think they're going to change course and get rid of Sharia, David?
Yeah, the Taliban just constantly backs down from everything that anyone tells
Yes,
them to do.
indeed.
These are guys who are willing to live in caves for decades because that's how patient they are. That you will eventually give up, and they like what do you
Yep.
do to these guys? Oh, we're gonna do this. Yeah, yeah, that'll work.
It's just amazing to me that all these years after 9/11, somebody like Volker Turk, who is a respected international authority, and his line is human rights, and he clearly has no idea, not the first idea, why Afghanistan is a human rights basket case right now. And he wouldn't dare, if we went to him and said, "Hey, Turk, it's because of Islam and Sharia," he would say, "Oh, no, no, you're Islamophobic." It's crazy.
Mhm.
And so it's right there in front of his face, and he has to pretend otherwise.
And it's messed up because, you and I have seen the stories about what's going on in Afghanistan when there are food shortages and so on, that, families have to sell their 7-year-old daughters into marriage with, some wealthier 50 some year old and so on. They have to do this just to feed their other kids. And so it's, guess what? Even if you put sanctions on the Taliban will be okay. It's everyone else is going to, the Taliban's going to make sure that the Taliban gets fed. It's everyone else. Everyone else is going to suffer. And so it's just a awful situation. And you're not getting out of this by not understanding anything.
Indeed. But not understanding anything is
That's
it's
a
the
requirement.
malady of our age. Yeah.
Well, that's a requirement.
That's
It's like,
it, man.
hey, do you want to be in any position of authority over anything that goes on in the world? Yeah, I do. Well, do you know anything about Islam or how Islam works or what it teaches? Or because if you do, that's a deal breaker. Yeah, you have to be completely, utterly, totally ignorant and incompetent to be put in any sort of position of authority in the world right now,
And
apparently.
that's a tremendous segue to our next story, which comes from Hamtramck, Michigan, which used to be called Little Warsaw because it was an overwhelmingly Polish population, but now, because of an influx of Muslim migrants, it is the first city in the United States to have an all-Muslim city council.
Nice.
And people were thrilled about that.
I know I was.
The leftists in Hamtramck and the surrounding areas were thrilled because this is an example of the multiculturalism that they've wanted to bring about. And now what you have is a tremendous feeling of betrayal
Hmm.
because the city council there has banned the flying of the LGBTQ pride flag on any city grounds.
It's
And
weird.
so the left, of course, which is pushing this LGBTQ business on everybody, this lesbian former city council member, because now the city council is all Muslims, she said, "We welcomed you. We
Mm-hmm.
created nonprofits to help
Mm-hmm.
feed,
Yep,
clothe,
they
find
did.
housing. We
Mm-hmm.
did everything we could to make your transition here
Everything.
easier. And
Mm-hmm.
this is how you repay us, by
Mm-hmm.
stabbing us in the back."
You think?
Who saw that coming?
How about anyone with an IQ above 70? Right?
It's incredible. It's incredible.
Like, my goodness, man. I mean, that's been the system. That's been the system since the time of Muhammad. Go in there, form some alliances for temporary protection and stuff like this until you beat your common enemy, and then oh yeah, now we're at war with our allies too. You're no longer our allies. We got to kill you too. That's been the system all along. But yeah, it's just, I mean, it's absolutely amazing. We've been saying for a long time how like if there are two groups that definitely do not go together, it would be LGBTQ and Islam. Like those would be like fundamentally opposed. But no, they had a deal. It's hey guys, if you just team up with us because we have our common victimhood status, and so we can team up. We come together like Devastator and Transformers, and then we'll be on the same victimhood team, and then we can fight our common enemies and so on. And so what's the deal? Well, you guys support us. You guys support, leftist politicians. And in return, politicians, journalists, educators, entertainers, all of us across the board will protect you and your profit from criticism. We will, anyone who dares question anything from your prophet or from your book, we'll call them racist, Islamophobic, hate-mongering bigots. And we will support mass Muslim immigration so we can keep building up populations until you take over entire city councils. Wait a minute, you take over one city council and you're already throwing the deal out the window?
Yep.
Like, who would have thunk it?
And the leftists are so stupid that anybody who would have told them, you cherish your LGBTQ business, it's going to backfire, this alliance with the Muslims. But they, of course, denounced anybody who told them that as racists, Islamophobes. And so they, of course, if they hadn't been sold out to moral compromise, maybe they would not have been so intellectually challenged as well. Mm-hmm. It all goes together. Meanwhile, yes.
One second. I just wanted to add. This is why. See, people don't get. People. I don't know. I think it's the main thing I see. It's like the trajectories of things that happen. There's events, and then there's what happens in the wake of those events. So the discussion you had, we started off this with talking about jihad and how amazing it is that all, the Dawah guys, 10 years ago, all the Dawah guys, there's no death penalty for apostasy. It's Islamophobes made that up. And they made up all this stuff because they want to preserve their alliances with the left. And now they all admit it, and people miss the big picture. Here's the big picture. The big picture is, for years, their protection, because keep in mind, they're minorities. Muslims are minorities in the West. They're like 1.1% of the population in America, right? So very tiny minority. And so I kind of need protection. If you want protection from criticism and so on, you need some big, powerful allies. Well, they had big, powerful allies. They had powerful allies who controlled almost every institution that had influence, right? And so these are their allies. And they realize, wait a minute, now we've got to the point where we want to sever that alliance. Now we've reached the time when we are to sever this alliance with the left, with LGBTQ stuff. And now we're going to go out. Well, they understand, wait a minute, we can't just be on our own. We can't just be 1% of the population and just be totally on our own with both sides mad at us. So the new plan was, now we'll align with the right. Now we'll buddy it up with the right. We'll align with Christians and conservatives. We'll just align with all these, and that'll be our new protection. And it all just broke down, right? It all just broke down. No, actually, we're gonna kill apostates, and we're gonna marry little kids, and so. And people on the right caught on much quicker than people on the left did. That I do not think this is actually going to be an alliance that's going to work in the future. Like as soon as people see it, wait a minute, you guys want to do what? You guys want to do what? You're working towards an Islamic state. You want to do what? Marry kids and start chopping off body parts and subjugate everyone. You're going to make us pay jizya. Wait, what? No, I'm not aligning with that. So it was, hey, we're severing this. We're going to form this new alliance. And oops, that alliance is collapsing as fast as they're trying to form it. And so, gonna be lonely.
I hope so.
Lonely,
I know they're
so very lonely.
I've encountered, unfortunately, quite a few people on the right lately who think, oh, wow, look, the left and the Muslims are splitting, and so we can form alliances with these conservative Muslims who are against the trans business and the LGBTQ madness, and they're just as naive as the left has been.
Yeah, but notice, conservatives, basically anyone in the West, they've been bombarded with this for years. That no, Islam is great and wonderful and so on, and so they think that it's still in their minds that you've got some radicals and so on, but that's not the population of Muslims. They don't support this kind of stuff, and so they still think, oh yeah, if you want to switch teams, come over here, great, we'd be happy to have you, and they're finding out very quickly, wait a minute, you guys, you want to do what? You think it's okay to marry and have sex with a 4-year-old like Daniel Hakikachu? You want to chop people's heads off? You think it's okay to beat women into, you think what? Mm-hmm. And so, Yeah, it's just I don't think it's going to work out, Robert. I don't think it's going to work out for them.
Well, I think you're right. I just hope stupidity doesn't prevail as it so often does. Speaking of stupidity, we got 151 people on the terror watch list. That's overwhelmingly jihadis. There might be a couple of people here and there who are not jihadis, who are some other kind of terrorist, but it's pretty much 151 jihadis. And they were apprehended crossing the border, which means there were quite a few others who were not caught, who are here now. The border, the southern border of the United States being essentially wide open, the jihadis have noticed. Now, David, the reason why I mention this is because it's not just the story about the 151 people on the terror watch list who were apprehended, but the Council on American Islamic Relations, our old friends, they have filed suit to end the terror watch list. And that would be one neat way to make it so that nobody on the terror watch list is crossing the border anymore. It'd solve the problem.
Problem solved.
Yep. And I think that they have a very real chance, given the current atmosphere, to end the terror watch list. And anyway, it doesn't even seem like the terror watch list does much of anything. Maybe they just watch as you blow stuff up. But so many times, especially in Europe, I see stories that I put at jihadwatch.org of some guy starting, shouting Allahu Akbar, doing the random stabbings or vehicular jihad, whatever. And it says he was known to police. He was on the S file, which is the French terror watch list. Or he was on the MI5 had him on their watch list in Britain. And so these watch lists are only of limited effectiveness, but certainly if you clear them away altogether, then you're just asking for more. All right, we've got a few more minutes here, David. In Iran, there was a dental scientific conference, and the dental scientific conference was canceled because it was allowing in women who were wearing hijab. And so, as it turns out, there are over 1,000 businesses, 1,094 businesses in just one province of Iran, Gilan province, that have been closed down by the government because they allow in women without hijab. I don't know how a country can sustain its economy if it's closing businesses left and right because they're not obeying Islamic laws. What do you think?
Yep.
Yep, that's right.
No way around it.
No way around it. Okay, in France, we have the usual kind of story. We have Notre Dame Basilica in Nice. And Notre Dame Basilica in Nice, Mass was going on, and what happened? But a Muslim migrant burst into the cathedral screaming,
peace and love, no. This MAGA country, no. I got to go with my gut and say Allahu Akbar.
That's it, man.
Wow.
I don't know how you do it, but yes, we've been here before. In any case, France has been here before too. There are so many incidents like this, and it just seems like nobody ever gets a clue. Nobody does anything effective. They just keep bringing in more. Same thing in Germany. 8 Muslim migrants, sexually abused a 13-year-old girl in an outdoor pool. Why do you think that might be, David? Why would they do that?
I'm guessing something to do with Islam.
Yeah, I think that, you said it actually at the beginning of the show, that women who are not covered, they should be covered according to the Quran, because then they're not to be molested. Mm-hmm. So if they're not covered, they can be molested. Mm-hmm. There you go.
Yep.
13, though, it's getting a little old for these guys, I think.
Yeah, it's a senior citizen in Islam. I mean, imagine, Daniel Hakikachu thinks that if you're 4,
man,
that if you're 4 and you get some sort of signs of maturity or something like that, then you're ready. You're ready to be married. But think about that. If you actually think that 4-year-old is ready to start having kids and so on, then okay, so I mean, you've got like, okay, I've got my 13-year-old, and then she has a daughter who's 9 years old, and the 9-year-old has a daughter who's 4 years old, and so on. It's like this Russian nesting doll situation with all these little tiny kids and stuff going on. But I mean, think this is mainstream. That's why it's funny when Anwar Musa here in the chat was spamming. He's trolling and saying, "Do I need to bring Muhammad Hijab and Daniel?" Like, wait, I am their biggest fans. Robert, we know.
Oh yeah.
You know me behind the scenes. I absolutely love these guys. These are the guys doing our work for us. Muhammad Hijab says.
Yeah.
Muhammad Hijab says, if you go with the Quran, you would conclude that you can have sex with a 5-year-old, because all it says is, yes, you can marry, have sex with, and divorce girls all before the age of puberty. He doesn't believe that that's okay, because he thinks you have to wait for a little something extra from the Hadith. But he's saying if you just go with the Quran, yeah, you can have sex with a 5-year-old.
And then
Daniel's like,
Hakikaju is 4 years old.
Yeah, well, I mean, Hakikaju would have to be 11 months old, but yeah, he was specifically asked, what about consummating a marriage with a 4-year-old? As long as there have been some sort of signs of precocious puberty, like girls who get puberty way too early, and that's totally fine. But notice these are becoming the champions of dawah. Muhammad Hijab says that Western women who criticize Islam, they're waiting to be raped. Deep down, they're waiting to be raped. They're going to dress up for Muslims when they come and invade and so on. This is, Mr. Golden Showers himself, and Daniel Hakikaju. Yeah, we got to beat our wives into submission. What else are you going to do? You going to have the government beat them? What? Well, why would you want that? Child marriage, jihad, killing apostates. They're finally. It's like one massive message from the Dawah community today. Hey, everything all these critics of Islam said for the past 20 years, and we called them liars, it's actually true. Do I hate these guys for saying that? No, I'm their biggest fans right now. Keep saying it, guys.
Yeah, I actually told Daniel Hakikaju when I met him before that show that I was a big fan, and it was great to see him affirm the death penalty for apostasy, affirm his support for the Taliban, many other things on that show. But we'll be talking about that tomorrow night with Apostate Prophet on his channel, so be sure to tune in there, 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. And this has been another thrilling episode of This Week in Jihad. Thank you for being here. Until next week, God willing, pray, hope, and don't worry.